The Imperial invasion fleet loomed over Kessler 9 like a storm of metal and fire, descending upon the colony with the arrogance of a force that had never known defeat. The Galactic Empire was vast, ruthless, and efficient. When they decided to conquer a world, it wasn't a battle. It was annihilation. Kessler 9, a small human outpost on the fringes of the Orion Arm, was nothing to them. A minor colony. A backwater. And it had no army. At least, that's what the Empire thought. On the command deck of the warship Vindicator, High Commander Jorvek sneered at the incoming battle report. Pathetic, he muttered. There's no military presence here. No planetary defenses. Barely a militia. One of his officers, a sharp-eyed Zelvarian named Major Vogt, glanced at the holographic display. Sensors detect only 12 human combatants actively moving near the jungle outskirts. Jorvek barked out a short, derisive laugh. 12? That's adorable. The bridge crew chuckled along with him. The whole invasion force numbered 5,000 elite Imperial troopers, equipped with plasma rifles, heavy walkers, and air support. They had crushed worlds defended by millions. And now, their enemy was 12 humans? It was laughable. Jorvek leaned forward. Deploy the first wave. I want this battle over before dinner. With a rumble of engines, dropships descended from the sky, unloading squads of Imperial shock troopers. Soldiers marched forward in gleaming black armor, rifles at the ready. Their orders were simple: wipe out all resistance. They didn't know that the hunt had already begun. The first deaths come fast. Sergeant Droken, a veteran of 100 campaigns, led the first squad into the dense jungle terrain. He didn't expect a fight. He expected a slaughter. Spread out, he ordered, motioning his soldiers forward. This'll be over in minutes. Then, the first man went down. A sudden, muffled crack echoed through the trees. Droken heard a wet, sickening splatter, like someone smashing a melon with a hammer. He turned, only to see Private Gorvan's body collapse. His helmet was gone, replaced by a red mist. Shot. Clean through the visor. A single bullet, straight between the eyes. Contact, someone shouted. The squad froze. Another crack. Another soldier dropped. Then another. Panic set in. They couldn't see their attacker. There was no muzzle flash, no visible movement. Where are they? Droken bellowed, spinning in circles. No response. Then, another shot. This one hit Corporal Vrex in the knee. He collapsed, screaming. The squad turned their weapons toward the jungle, spraying plasma rounds wildly. Nothing. A whisper crackled through their comms. It wasn't an Imperial standard. It was human. Run. The voice was calm. Cold. Like a predator speaking to dying prey. The first wave breaks. Jorvek watched from the warship's command center, confused. The vitals of his first wave flatlined one by one. What in the void is going on down there? He demanded. Major Vogt stared at the screen, her brow furrowed. Sir, these aren't militia tactics. Jorvek's jaw tightened. Then what are they? The comms channel erupted with static, then a desperate voice cut through. It's a trap. We're being slaughtered. There. Silence. The line went dead. Jorvek's fingers clenched into a fist. His entire first wave, over 300 men, had just vanished. He turned to Vogt, his voice low. Who the hell are these humans? Vogt exhaled sharply. Sir. I think they're special forces. Jorvek's stomach twisted. Special forces? Impossible. The humans don't have a fleet in this sector. They don't have an army stationed here. No, sir, Vogt admitted. But the ones who are here, they're not regular soldiers. They're something else. The jungle turns into a nightmare. Down below, the second wave of Imperial reinforcements landed in the jungle. 500 men. They moved in tighter formations, deploying drones to scan the area. Thermal scanners swept the trees. The Empire had faced insurgents before, they weren't about to fall for another ambush. Then, the jungle spoke. Not in words, but in death. A firebomb erupted from the underbrush, consuming an entire squad in flames. The air filled with their screams. Another squad's comms went haywire. Their own drones turned against them, firing at random. An Imperial officer tried to radio for orders. Instead, he heard his own voice played back to him. The enemy was inside their communications. The psychological warfare begins. The Green Berets weren't just fighting them. They were playing with them. A squad found a body hanging upside down from a tree, stripped of armor. Carved into his chest were Imperial coordinates. A warning. Others found footsteps leading into a clearing. The moment they followed, landmines detonated, blasting limbs into the trees. Fear set in. "Who are these monsters?" one soldier screamed. Then, from the shadows, they got an answer. The ghost strike. A green beret emerged from the foliage. He moved without sound, like a wraith. His face was painted in mud and blood, blending with the darkness. Before the nearest Imperial could even scream, a blade punched into his throat. A second soldier swung his rifle. The green beret was gone before he could fire. Then, from the trees, the real slaughter began. Suppressors hissed. Knives flashed. Soldiers dropped one by one. An Imperial sniper tried to get a lock. Before he could, a green beret ripped his throat out with a combat knife. The remaining Imperials ran. The green berets let them. Because fear was part of the plan. The last mistake, underestimation. Jorvik listened to the second wave screams. 500 more dead. His eyes darkened. No human militia fought like this. No ragtag resistance could erase an invasion force. His arrogance was gone. A single message came through from the surface. It was broadcast on all Imperial frequencies. A human voice. Calm. Cold. "You should have sent more men." Jorvik finally understood. He wasn't fighting humans. He was fighting green berets. And that meant one thing. This war was already lost. Imperial reinforcements arrive, into a meat grinder. Smoke curled through the blackened treetops, mingling with the scent of burnt flesh. The jungle was alive with the echoes of screams, gunfire, and death. The first and second waves had been obliterated. But the Galactic Empire was not known for retreat. Commander Jorvik refused to accept the impossible. He stood at the heart of the Imperial forward base, his fists clenched as he watched the holographic casualty report update in real time. 1,100 men dead or missing. Gone. Vanished into the jungle. Unacceptable, he hissed. His red gaze turned toward his officers. Deploy heavy reinforcements. Send in war drones, flamethrowers, shock troops. I want those damn humans exterminated. Major Vote hesitated. Sir, if they are special forces, this terrain. Jorvik slammed his fist on the console. They are 12 men. Do you understand how ridiculous this is? We are the Galactic Empire. We do not lose to primitive savages hiding in trees. A tense silence filled the command tent. No one dared argue. Within minutes, 1,500 Imperial reinforcements were inbound. Armored shock troopers. Drones with infrared targeting. Flamethrower teams ready to torch the jungle to the ground. Jorvik watched them descend. A cruel smirk tugged at his lips. Burn them out. The jungle answers with blood. The Imperial soldiers advanced in tight formations, their weapons raised, their sensors sweeping the terrain. The dense foliage was a maze of shadows, vines, and death. They expected a firefight. They got a massacre. A stealthy pop hiss whispered through the jungle air. The lead officer collapsed, his throat punctured by a suppressed round. Panic rippled through the ranks. Contact. Boom. A grenade exploded, ripping through the formation. Blood and body parts painted the trees. The Imperials fired wildly in every direction, plasma bolts tearing through empty space. But the enemy wasn't in front of them. They were already among them. The Green Berets hunt. The first kill was silent. A green beret dropped from the treetops, his knife flashing. The Imperial soldier beneath him gurgled as his throat was opened. The second came faster. A garrote wire looped around an officer's neck, a quick twist, and his spine snapped. A third soldier turned, his rifle raised, only to be yanked backward into the undergrowth, his screams cut short. The Imperials were trained soldiers. The Green Berets were killers. The jungle was their hunting ground. And the Imperials? They were prey. Psychological warfare begins. Minutes turned to hours of horror. The Imperial formations shattered. Commanders tried to regroup their men, but every attempt ended in death. The jungle wasn't just hiding the Green Berets. It was on their side. Comms fell silent. Drones malfunctioned. The Imperials' own surveillance equipment turned against them, broadcasting their own men's screams on a loop. Worst of all, the bodies started appearing. Hanging from trees. Stripped of armor. Their dog tags nailed into their foreheads. It wasn't just a fight anymore. It was psychological destruction. Imperial troops whispered to each other in terror. These aren't humans. They're ghosts. They're demons. The Green Berets let them whisper. Because fear was a weapon, too. Imperial firepower, turned against them. Jorvik watched the disaster unfold from orbit. His heavily armed forces were losing. To 12 men. How? He snarled. We outnumber them over 100 to 1. Major Vote's voice was tight. Sir, we miscalculated. These aren't just soldiers. They're experts in asymmetrical warfare. This is what they do. Jorvik's rage turned to unease. Get me a live feed, he ordered. The holoscreen flickered, and he finally saw what his men were facing. A burning jungle. Smoke curling through the undergrowth. And then, shadows moved. 12 men. Covered in dirt, blood, and jungle camouflage. Moving like ghosts. Silent. Precise. Jorvik felt cold sweat form on the back of his neck. They weren't fighting a normal enemy. They were fighting death itself. The Empire's last stand in the jungle. The remaining Imperial troops, 500 left, formed a final defensive line. Sentry guns. Portable shields. Drones circling the perimeter. We hold here, the Imperial commander shouted. The jungle went silent. For a moment, the troopers felt hope. Then, bang. A sniper shot punched through a sentry's helmet, dropping him instantly. Boom. An explosion ripped through a supply depot, sending fireballs into the sky. Crack crack crack. Precise shots cut down officers one by one. The Imperials screamed. They fired blindly into the jungle. And the jungle fired back. A green beret burst from the smoke, blade flashing. 3 Imperials died before they could react. Another soldier turned to run, only to be yanked into the shadows. A green beret voice whispered through the enemy comms. You shouldn't have come here. Then, the final wave of gunfire. Imperial soldiers collapsed. The last survivors dropped their weapons. They didn't want to fight anymore. They wanted to surrender. But the Green Berets weren't accepting prisoners. Jorvik finally understands, too late. Jorvik stood frozen as the last comm transmission came through. A whisper. A dying soldier's voice, trembling. They're not soldiers, sir. They're something else. The line went dead. Silence filled the warship's bridge. Jorvik's mouth went dry. He had underestimated them. He had thought them weak. Now, the jungle was littered with the corpses of his best men. A single message came through on his personal communicator. A human voice. Cold. Unshaken. You're next. Jorvik staggered back. For the first time in his career, true fear gripped his chest. He wasn't fighting a rebellion. He wasn't fighting an army. He was being hunted. And the hunters wore green berets. Jorvik's desperation, and the monster he unleashes. Jorvik stood on the command deck of his flagship, staring at the glowing tactical display. It should have been impossible. He had sent thousands of elite Imperial soldiers to crush a dozen humans. Yet the battle reports read like a horror story. Casualty count, over 1,800 dead. Enemy confirmed kills, 0. The 12 phantoms in the jungle had turned his mighty Imperial forces into nothing more than corpses fertilizing the soil. Jorvik's claws gripped the edges of the command console. His officers stood silent, afraid to speak. Then, his decision was made. If the jungle favored these demons, he would burn it down. Deploy the Mortanis protocol, Jorvik ordered. A chill ran through the room. Major Vote hesitated. Sir, if we use chemical firebombs, it will. Do it. Jorvik's voice was a snarl. I want that jungle turned to ash. I want those things buried beneath fire and rubble. Vote gave a stiff nod. Minutes later, orbital payloads were armed. The jungle was about to become a furnace. Hell falls from the sky. The first firebomb hit with the force of a meteor. Foom. A shockwave of napalm and toxic gas exploded outward, turning the thick jungle into a raging inferno. The sky glowed orange. The trees screamed as they burned. Hundreds of Imperial soldiers, still lost in the jungle, were consumed instantly, their armor melting, their bodies turned to ash. From the safety of his warship, Jorvik finally exhaled. That's it. We have them now. But deep in the jungle, the Green Berets were already moving. They had known this was coming. And they had planned for it. Escape beneath the firestorm. Flames ripped through the jungle. But the Green Berets weren't there. They had moved underground. A hidden network of tunnels, painstakingly dug and prepared for this very moment, led them beneath the battlefield. As the jungle died above them, they crawled through the tight, suffocating darkness, using oxygen reserves to breathe. The enemy thought they were trapped. They weren't. They were waiting. Waiting for the Empire to believe the job was done. Waiting for Jorvik to lower his guard. waiting to strike back. The Imperials move into the ashes, and begin to die. 12 hours later, the firestorm had passed. The once thick jungle was now a wasteland of blackened stumps and glowing embers. Jorvek's senses showed no movement. He allowed himself a cruel grin. "It's over," he whispered. He ordered his troops to move in and confirm the kills. 1,200 Imperial shock troops descended into the wasteland, scanning for any signs of life. They found nothing. No bodies. No human remains. Nothing. Then, a single rifle shot. A soldier dropped, his helmet punctured. Another shot. A second trooper collapsed, his visor shattering. Panic. They whipped around, only to find nothing but the empty, smoking terrain. More soldiers fell. One by one. Precise. Unseen. Silent death. The Imperials screamed into their comms. "Where are they?" The answer came too late. From the ashes, the ghosts had returned. The counterattack, a war of shadows and death. The green berets emerged like specters. Covered in soot, hidden by the burning ruins. They were everywhere, and nowhere. The Imperials never saw them coming. A green beret knifed a soldier from behind, dragged him into the ashes, and vanished. Another trooper turned a corner, only to have a silent blade slit his throat. A squad of Imperials tried to regroup, only for their entire position to be annihilated by a single grenade. Chaos. Terror. Blood. Every time an Imperial turned his head, another soldier was already dead. The green berets were reaping them like a farmer cuts wheat. Jorvek watched helplessly from his warship. And then, one of his officers' screens flickered. A live transmission. A grainy video feed. And Jorvek saw them. The 12 men. Still alive. Still hunting. One of them spoke directly into the camera. His voice was calm. Cold. Absolute. "You should have sent more men." Then, the feed cut to static. And the screaming began again. Jorvek's mind breaks. Jorvek staggered backward, pale. He had unleashed fire and death upon them. And they had survived. No. They had adapted. His forces were broken, shattered, leaderless. These weren't just elite warriors. They were monsters wearing human skin. Jorvek felt something he had never known before. True, unrelenting fear. Then, a new alert on his screen. Something was moving toward his warship. A single transmission came through. A voice, one he recognized now. "You burned our jungle. Now, we're coming for you." Jorvek's breath caught in his throat. The green berets had survived. And now, they were bringing the war to his doorstep. Jorvek's warship, the Ravager, hovered high above the burning ruins of the jungle, a massive, fortress-like dreadnought armed with enough firepower to level an entire continent. Its dark hull gleamed under the glow of the destruction below. Inside, alarms blared. "Incoming contacts," one of the sensor officers shouted. Jorvek snapped toward him. "What?" 12 heat signatures. "They're approaching fast, impossibly fast." Jorvek felt his stomach tighten. Impossible. No one could penetrate an Imperial warship's defensive perimeter. No one except them. His mind reeled. How? Then the answer came. The Green Berets had stolen Imperial drop pods. And now, they were using Jorvek's own technology against him. The next moment, boom. The entire ship shook violently. They had landed. The fortress falls silent. Jorvek snarled. "Deploy every available soldier. We wipe them out now." The Ravager's corridors filled with thousands of heavily armed Imperial troops. Elite shock units, cybernetic enforcers, and war droids all took positions, their weapons trained toward the access points. The airlocks hissed. The Imperial soldiers held their breath. And then, nothing. No explosions. No gunfire. Only silence. Minutes passed. The Imperials began to shift nervously. Then, the lights went out. The entire warship was plunged into absolute darkness. And in that moment, the Green Berets became ghosts. The killing begins. A lone Imperial soldier turned on his night vision visor. He barely had time to react before a blade slid into his throat. Another soldier, hearing a whisper of movement, spun around, only to be yanked into the shadows, his muffled scream cut short. The Green Berets moved like wraiths, slipping through the ship's corridors, striking with unmatched precision. A squad of Imperials opened fire at a flicker of movement. Nothing but empty air. Then, their own shadows betrayed them. From the vents, the ceiling, the walls, death rained down. Grenades rolled into choke points, blasting Imperials into charred, twisted corpses. Silenced rifles spat out precise headshots. Knives slit throats before screams could escape. The Imperials fought blindly, firing into the darkness, hitting nothing but the steel walls. Their fear turned to terror. They were no longer the hunters. They were prey. Jorvik watches his army die. Jorvik and his officers sat in the command center, watching the horror unfold on the security monitors. Each screen showed Imperial soldiers dying in real time. One team of 5 troopers ran through a corridor, until an explosion sent their charred bodies tumbling like ragdolls. Another squad of 6 stacked up behind cover, waiting for an attack, only to be picked off one by one. No enemy was ever visible. Only the bodies remained. Jorvik's claws trembled. These weren't soldiers. They were demons. And they were inside his warship. Then, the command doors hissed open. Jorvik whirled around. The first Green Beret had arrived. The final stand. A single soldier stood in the entrance. Blood-smeared armor. A cold, emotionless gaze. He held an Imperial rifle, stolen from one of Jorvik's own men. Jorvik's officers opened fire. The soldier vanished. One moment he was there, the next, he was a blur of motion. Gunfire erupted. By the time Jorvik's officers realized what had happened, 5 of them were already dead. Knives embedded in throats. Gunshots to the skull. And then, the others arrived. The remaining Green Berets stepped into the room, moving with lethal precision. The battle lasted less than 30 seconds. When it was over, Jorvik stood alone. His officers were dead. His warship was lost. And the demons in human form stood before him. Jorvik's defeat, and his final realization. Jorvik backed away, his breath ragged. He had ruled entire planets. Commanded armies that conquered solar systems. But now, he was nothing. A hollow, broken creature facing the monsters he had once mocked. One of the Green Berets stepped forward. Jorvik saw his face clearly now. Scarred. Cold. A man forged by war. Jorvik's voice shook. What are you? The soldier's answer was quiet. Absolute. Green Berets. Jorvik's eyes widened. He had underestimated humans. He had mocked them. And now, his empire would burn because of it. The Green Beret raised his weapon. And Jorvik finally understood. It was already over. Jorvik lay on the floor of his shattered command deck, his breath coming in ragged, uneven gasps. His jaw ached where the Green Beret's rifle had smashed into it, his thick, purple blood dripping from split flesh. He reached up with a trembling claw, wiping the blood away, but he couldn't stop his hands from shaking. He had been a general of the Imperial Grand Armada for over 50 years. He had burned planets to the ground, had ordered the extermination of entire species, had fought against the best warriors the galaxy had ever seen, and won. And yet, 12 humans had undone him. 12 warriors, armed with nothing but stolen weapons, guile, and sheer willpower, had turned his flagship into a graveyard. The thought sent a fresh wave of rage burning through his veins. This couldn't be real. The humans, they were supposed to be weak. They were supposed to die screaming beneath the might of the Imperial war machine. But instead, it was his own soldiers who had died screaming. He clenched his fangs, forcing himself onto his knees. The Green Beret standing over him, the one who had humiliated him, destroyed everything he had built, stared at him with a look of absolute indifference. There was no hatred in his gaze. No anger. Just the cold, emotionless stare of a man who had already won. Jorvik let out a low, rasping breath. This wasn't a warrior. This was a monster. The Empire's last hope crumbles. Beyond the shattered command deck, the Ravager was dying. The once glorious Imperial warship, pride of the fleet, was now a twisted, burning husk, its corridors filled with smoke, its once mighty halls reduced to nothing but death and wreckage. The Empire's most elite soldiers, the ones Jorvik had spent decades training, arming, and refining into the perfect war machine, were now corpses littering the floors. Some had tried to run. Some had tried to fight. It hadn't mattered. The Green Berets hunted them all the same. Jorvik could still hear the desperate screams of his men over the ship's comms. He could still hear the gunfire, the explosions, the muffled gurgles of Imperials being silenced in the dark. They never stood a chance. The execution. Jorvik forced himself to his feet, even as the ship shuddered violently around him. He would not die on his knees. If the Green Berets were going to execute him, he would face them like a warrior. He squared his shoulders, staring into the cold, merciless eyes of the soldier in front of him. Go on, he rasped. Do it. Kill me. The Green Beret tilted his head slightly, as if considering it. Then, in a voice cold and absolute, he said, "You underestimated us." Jorvik let out a bitter laugh. "We should have won." The soldier didn't react. He didn't gloat. He didn't revel in victory. He simply spoke the truth. "You never had a chance." Jorvik felt a chill creep down his spine. Not from fear. From the realization that the Empire had made the gravest mistake in its history. They hadn't just mocked humans. They had angered them. And now the Empire would burn for it. The Green Beret raised his rifle. Jorvik let out a slow breath. For the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to lose. Bang! Darkness swallowed him. The Ravager's death, and the warning to the Empire. The Green Berets moved through the ship like ghosts, clearing the last pockets of resistance. By now, every surviving Imperial soldier knew the truth. This wasn't just a battle. This was a message. One Green Beret knelt beside the ship's reactor core, planting the last of the explosives. Another activated a detonator, setting a 10-minute countdown. They had no interest in capturing the Ravager. They were going to erase it from existence. The Green Berets slipped into the stolen Imperial escape pods, launching away from the warship. From space, they watched as the once mighty Ravager became a burning fireball. Explosions ripped through its hull, consuming it in an inferno of destruction. The Empire's greatest warship, the symbol of their might, their power, their dominance, was gone. No wreckage would be left for them to salvage. No survivors would return to tell the tale. All that would remain was the legend of the warriors who did it. The aftermath, fear spreads across the stars. Word of the Ravager's destruction spread like wildfire across the galaxy. Entire Imperial fleets, once invincible, now feared the shadows. Every general, every warlord, every emperor in the Empire spoke in hushed whispers about what had happened. And soon, a single name began to spread. A name that would haunt the Empire for generations to come. Green Berets. Once, the Empire had laughed at humans. Now, they feared them. Because now, they understood the truth. Epilogue, the Emperor's Rage. In the Imperial Palace, deep within the heart of the Empire's capital world, the Supreme Emperor of the Dominion sat upon his throne, his claws gripping the armrests so tightly that they cracked. Before him, a trembling advisor knelt, relaying the reports from the battlefield. The Ravager was gone. Jorvik was dead. The Green Berets had butchered the Empire's finest like animals. The Emperor's slit-pupiled eyes narrowed. His rage was silent. Absolute. No one spoke. No one dared. Then, in a voice so low and venomous that it sent a chill through the air, the Emperor uttered 4 words. Find them. Kill them. But deep in his heart, a single, unshakable thought lingered. For the first time in millennia, the Empire had an enemy it could not control. For the first time, the Empire knew fear. Final message: the Empire mocked humanity, now they fear its wrath. The Green Berets came as shadows, unstoppable, relentless, merciless. They turned the Empire's pride into a graveyard. They shattered its might, burned its greatest warship, and left only terror in their wake. Now, the Empire trembles at the mere mention of their name. Once, they laughed at humanity. Now, they pray they never meet one again. Because when the Green Berets come, there is no surrender. No escape. Only death. Fire, the hunt has just begun. Fire.